We're going to start off with the topic of this conversation and what does it mean to have a conscious relationship? What does it mean to have a super conscious relationship? I think the reason I chose the title super conscious relationship is just from my own experience. I was a fully trained and accredited mindfulness teacher with a lot of experience teaching mindfulness and teaching people to be present. And I, for one, used to think that I had conscious relationships. And it was when I realized that I didn't that I started to have really conscious relationships. And I've been pursuing things deeper and deeper since kind of I quit the world of mindfulness. And I would say what I have now is kind of more like a super conscious relationship because you get super conscious to what a relationship is and how you are creating said relationship. And that's what we're going to look at today. So a conscious relationship is kind of in contrast to an ego-based relationship. So when I'm talking about an ego-based relationship, I don't mean ego as in, oh, they've got a big ego. I'm talking about what we call, in my world, the ego is who you think you are. It's how you think of yourself. That includes your beliefs, your values, and your ideas of yourself. That's what ego is. So an ego-based relationship is one ego relating to another ego. That's where most people are at. The reality, as far as I can understand, is most people don't want to have a conscious relationship. This is not a conversation for most people. Most people don't want to get conscious. They want to stay unconscious. Most people are scared of getting conscious because they think they're going to find something big, dark, and scary in there. There never is. I'll just tell you that right now. There's never anything big and dark and scary and monstrous in your consciousness. You think there is, but that doesn't mean there is. There never is. So what does it mean to have a super conscious relationship? Well, let's look at why, for those of us that have exes, we're not going to be talking about our exes, but for those of us that have had a relationship where 1 minute we're in love with someone and we think they're the best thing since sliced bread, and at some point later down the line, we don't. That's really interesting. How 1 minute we think that this person is the source of all of our joy, our happiness, our fulfillment. And later down the line, we think they're the source of, well, whatever it is, you replace the love. I mean, in some people's cases, it's hatred, disdain, disgust, whatever it is, because something changes. We create how we perceive the person that we're relating to. In other words, we don't just perceive a person, we create them. And in short, that's what it means to have a super conscious relationship. To look at the part that you are playing in your creation of the other. There was this TV series I was watching once, and I can't remember what it was called. There was this woman that was kind of like a psychopath, and almost everyone could see that. But some people were seduced by her. And one person in particular was seduced by her, and that was her boyfriend, her partner. And from the perspective of watching this series, you could see how she would manipulate him and how he would create her in his mind. And at one point, she just went so nuts, for lack of a better word, that he actually really saw who she was. And he said, and bear in mind this is fictional, but I think it's a really good portrayal, and it's certainly a really good story. What he said was something along the lines of, "Wow, I created you. I created you to be," and I can't remember the word he used, but it was a positive word. But now I see you for who you are, because when he was relating to her, he wasn't relating to her. He was relating to his creation of who he wanted her to be. And in that moment, when he saw her, he had a shift in consciousness. His consciousness rised, and he was suddenly more conscious of who he was, in fact, relating to. And it was like a epiphany for him, a moment of enlightenment where he woke up and saw who this was. And it's not even true that she's a psychopath and that she was manipulating him. That's still created. That's just a story. That's just a perspective. So to have a super conscious relationship is to see what is and to see what isn't. What isn't is the realms of what we create. Well, I want this person to be like that, so that's what I'm going to perceive, or that's what I'm going to hope for. The way that we work as human beings is we don't see what is. We see our personal reality, our thought created experience of life being reflected back to us. So it's true that relationships are merely mirrors for us to see our own ego. Someone does something or someone says something, and we see us reflected back in that. We see our values reflected back in someone else's behavior. We see our beliefs reflected back in what someone else says. To have a really super conscious relationship, it's really helpful to see which part of you is relating to another. Like, who's doing the relating? Is it your ego? Or is it who you really are beneath the ego, before the ego was created? I think the limitation of mindfulness is you do a bit of meditation and you then think that you're more present. But the problem with that is the ego is really tricky. And you might think that you're being present with someone while they're being angry, but the conditioned part of you is being present while that person is being angry. That's not who you are. If someone else is upset and you're triggered by that, it's the conditioned you that's reacting and relating to that upset. And if you check and look, you'll notice that you are not your conditioning, that you are not the conditioned part of you. If you actually check this out, you would see that you were there before your conditioning and during your conditioning. Because the you that you are has always been there. The you that you are has no judgment or opinion about what someone else is doing, because the you that you are is just pure awareness, consciousness. But we don't know that and we don't see that. So there's a conditioned us, and the conditioned us gets into a relationship with a conditioned someone else and thinks that they're the source of our happiness or they're the source of our misery. But really, they're just a mirror for us to grow, to get conscious, to wake up. Because when you really have a super conscious relationship, you really see where the source of your joy and love is coming from. If you think about someone that you love right now, maybe a daughter, might be a father, a husband, a wife, a pet, might be a religious figure. If you actually bring to mind someone or something that you love right now, and notice how that feels, and the warmth and the joy, where does it seem to you that that love is coming from? Because it's not coming from the other person. You're creating that. There is no joy in your dog. There is no love in your daughter. Not the love that you're feeling anyway. There is maybe love in there, hopefully, but not the love that you're feeling. You're creating that. Think of someone that you used to love that now maybe you don't so much, and maybe there's some negative feelings towards them. Where do you think those feelings are coming from? Because that person is not the source of your feelings or your frustration or your envy or your anger. It's all you. It's all created by you. So for some people, this can be a really confronting conversation. Because to get conscious means to take ownership, to take responsibility. And it also means to be empowered. And it also means that you really see the true source of your happiness, of your love, of your joy, and of the other things that maybe you don't want to feel as well. Because all feelings, all emotions are created from thought, from our thought, no one else's, from our thought. And other people do have their ego and they do say things and they do things. And sometimes our perceptions about what they've done and they say are accurate. But that doesn't mean that that's where your feelings are coming from. When you see that you're the one that generates your own love, happiness, and joy, you are whole and complete as a person, as a being. I mean, I love romance. I do. And I love the film Jerry Maguire for all sorts of reasons. And if you haven't seen it, it's a brilliant film with Tom Cruise. And there's a line in it, it's a very famous line that Tom Cruise gets asked to repeat when he's out. And it's when he says to his, I think it's his wife that I think they briefly separated or something. He looks at her and he says, "You complete me." And it's a really romantic line. Apparently, according to something I read once, it's one of the most romantic lines as voted by people. You complete me. And it's great. I think I got goosebumps when I watched it. But it's not true. We are complete already. And when you create a relationship from that completeness with another person that already knows they're complete too, and there's no ego, it's beautiful. When you create a relationship from need and lack, then that creates something different, and it gives you a fantastic opportunity to heal and to have a shift in consciousness. I heard on the radio recently that this couple got married, and I think it was one of the quickest annulments on record. So I think an annulment is where you get divorced, but it's not called a divorce because something happens so quickly after the marriage that is just completely not okay that you have an annulment rather than a divorce. And basically what happened was this couple got married, and the guy was a prankster, and when they were going to cut the cake, he got the cake and he splat it in her face, like on one of these clown shows or something. He splat the cake in her face. Apparently, and this is, I heard this on the radio, he thought it was hilarious, and she walked out of the wedding and asked for an annulment. And why I'm mentioning that is because I had a spiritual teacher say once that every new marriage has grounds for divorce within a week, but every divorce has grounds for getting married. It's how we're creating the other. Whenever we are in relation to another being, whatever they do, whatever they say, will bring up something in us, and a reaction, a thought, a feeling. And that's an opportunity for us to sit in that seat of consciousness and witness what's going on for us, to see how that's a mirror for us, to see what growth is required for us to become enlightened. I was in the supermarket the other day, and there was a toddler having a tantrum, like toddlers do. And I felt such love and compassion for the parent who was clearly really triggered by this young child and was shouting at the child that they were embarrassing them. And I felt such love and compassion for both of them, because in that moment, the parent, although they looked about 40, they were feeling like a 2-year-old. Well, that parent didn't have the consciousness and awareness to realize was that their child was showing them something. They were showing them some hurt, some pain that they had themselves. Because when you're relating to someone, there's either love or there's ego. And that's it. In relationships, there's either love or there's not. And why would you want to relate to someone with an absence of love? Why would you ever want to relate to anyone with an absence of love? The answer to all relationship struggles and problems is always love. Always. And let me just say, for some people that might be hearing something different to what I'm saying, love is not weak or passive. Love is and can be incredibly strong. I can tell someone to leave me alone from a place of love. I can have boundaries from a place of love. I can give someone feedback from a place of love. I can say to my son, no, you're not having any more ice cream today, from a place of love. I could also do it from a place of being triggered. But you can do it from a place of love too. what relationships do is they they bring our baggage into our consciousness. And sometimes it's not in our consciousness to start with, it's in the other person's consciousness. If we haven't got a high level of consciousness, we can't see our baggage. Another way of saying this is we all have blind spots. We all have things that we can't see. A blind spot is when you reverse your car into something, and even though it was right there, you couldn't see what it was because it was in your blind spot. A blind spot is when I open the fridge and I'm like, darling, where's the sauce? And she's like, it's right there. And I'm like, where? She's like, right there in front of you. And I'm like, where? She's like, right there. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Even though it's right there, I couldn't see it. A blind spot is when someone asks themselves, why do I keep getting into this type of relationship? Why me? That's a blind spot. You can't see it in your consciousness yet. If you ask, why do people always treat me like this? Have I got something written on my forehead? It's a blind spot because you're being in such a way that invites that sort of interaction for you so that you can see it in that mirror. And when you see it, when you really see it and you don't identify with it, then you're free. And we don't just have relationships with other people. We have relationships with life, with things. We have relationships with materialistic things. Like you have a relationship to your house, to your car. And if you want to know what your relationship is, it's how that thing occurs to you. So if I said, tell me about your house, and you said, oh, it's a nightmare, it's got this going on wrong with it, this going wrong with it, that tells us both about your relationship to your house. You have a relationship to your emotions. You have a relationship to the weather. You can't not have a relationship to these things unless you get really super conscious and you realize that there is just life itself, that you are life. There is just oneness. And the thing that creates the illusion of separation is thought. Thought creates the illusion of separation. Thought is what creates all our struggles, all our problems. It's all thought, all of it. And we can't see that it's thought because we live in a thought created reality. As Einstein said, reality is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And what he was pointing to is nothing woo-woo. We experience our own personal thought created experience. And we actually all know this, we just don't think about it. Like if I do ask you again to think about someone that you love, let's say I ask you to think of a partner or an ex-partner. So you think of perhaps an ex-boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a wife or an ex. Think about a time when you were in love with them, if you're not still in love with them, and how you created them in your mind. Now you know that not everyone else saw that person the same way as you do. They created them differently to you. So you know that you, in a way, had your own little bubble with this person, that you loved them and they loved you. And it does sometimes feel like a bubble. It's sometimes described as that. So you're living in an experience of this person that you've created. And you create it with thought. So it's a thought created experience. As much as we'd love to believe that love is some mystical thing, this type of love in relationships is created by the way we're perceiving the other person. I mean, there's a different type of love. Love is your true nature. When you get out of the way of everything with your thinking, you just rest in love. You come back to love. When people talk about love, a lot of the time what they're talking about is attachment. The type of love I'm talking about is the love that is already there before you're thinking, your natural state. So what I'm really interested in terms of having a super conscious relationship is how much do you create the other? To what extent is the other person a bit of like a blank slate and you're creating your experience of them? Now, I'm not saying they are a blank slate, that's a different conversation. But given that this is a conversation about your level of consciousness, what are you projecting onto them to create them in your experience? Every time you come across something that you're coming up against in a relationship, particularly if it's a pattern and you keep coming up against it, that is good news because it's an opportunity for you to see what's going on for yourself that has you experiencing this. I used to wonder why it was that my boss would pick me to give the most work to. And I would move teams and go to a different boss. And for some reason, unknown to me, this boss would give me more work than anyone else to do. And so I moved companies and I got myself in the same situation again with the boss giving me the most work. And I couldn't see why. Couldn't see why. Until I did see why, until I got conscious. Because at the time I couldn't say no because I was a people pleaser. I would have done anything I could so that my boss would have thought well of me. Anything. Well, not anything, but a lot of things. It was a blind spot for me. I didn't even know I was doing it. And when I saw, oh, hang on a minute, I'm trying so hard to impress him that I'm burning myself out and I'm not boundarying my workload, then I got conscious and then I had freedom with it. I was working with a client and I won't share any details to keep it anonymous, but they were saying, why are all men cheats? Why are all men cheats? And upon exploring this with it, she really actually believed that all men cheat on their wives and partners. She literally thought that was a truth. She didn't see that she was living in her thought created experience of men. So when she was dating, she was going to these dates pretty half-assed because she didn't really want to get into a relationship because she knew that in her mind they were going to cheat on her. That was an easy one because anyone can see apart from her that that's not a truth, that's just her thinking. But anytime we get stuck and we struggle, it's always thought. I'm not saying that there aren't some people out there that will cheat and that will abuse people and things like that. But if we keep attracting it, we might want to look at why we keep attracting it. Because that's where the power is, right? Like if we want to get super conscious, the consciousness is in us. Now, when you get two people, and again, we're talking about romantic relationships now, when you get two people in a conscious relationship and there's no ego, then wow. When you can relate to each other without an ego, there's just love and there's love. And when one of you gets caught up in your thinking and then there's ego again and you're triggered and the other one holds the love, this person lets go of their ego almost immediately. Another way of thinking about this is I've had this quite a lot in relationships where maybe I'm arguing with my partner and I'm triggered and then they're triggered. And then one of you laughs and it's an accident. You don't mean to laugh. You slip up. For a moment, you forget that you're in your ego and you want to make the other person wrong. And you come out of it and you laugh. And I've had it quite a few times where the other person then laughs, but then immediately tries really hard to get back into a huff. There's either love or there's ego. And in a relationship, when there's conflict, it's always going to take one of you, just one, to let go of your ego. And when you do that, it gives the other permission to let go of their ego too, to feel safe enough to go back to who they really are, before ego, before thought. And then there's love again. One of the questions I'm asked a lot is someone will come to me and say, it's not me, it's my partner. How do I get them to change? Just love them. Give them an opportunity. You can't make someone else change, but you can inspire them. The more you raise your consciousness, it's very likely the more they're going to want to raise theirs. And then when you're both in a conscious relationship, I don't know, I'd say it's probably one of the most enriching experiences you can have. So what does it mean to have a super conscious relationship? Let's sum up. I think really, if I was to sum up, it's about realizing your true nature, being clear who it is in you that's doing the relating, and really seeing that everything is a mirror. Everything is a mirror. Anytime your kids do something and you feel triggered, it's a mirror. And that's great. Because when you know that you're not feeling your kids and you're not feeling your wife and you're not feeling what your husband said and what you're feeling is you're thinking. And you know that that's actually how this game works, then you know how to play the game better. You stop looking to the other person for the source of your frustration. And you start looking towards your thinking. You stop looking towards another to fulfill you. And you start to look at your relationship to yourself.